The Abyss wasn't just James Cameron's underwater epic. It was a 6-month nightmare where Ed Harris nearly drowned multiple times and punched Cameron in the face, where Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio walked off set screaming, "We are not animals," and where the director himself almost died when his oxygen ran out 35 feet underwater. While audiences watched stunning alien encounters and emotional reunions in 1989, behind the cameras lurked the most brutal film production in Hollywood history, a torture chamber disguised as a nuclear reactor containment vessel filled with 7,500,000 gallons of chlorinated water. Here are 20 dark facts about the Abyss that reveal what happens when obsessive genius meets human endurance limits. And stick around for the bonus fact, because what Cameron's brother did with a live crab in his mouth is still one of cinema's most disturbing acting performances. Let's dive into hell. Number 20. Ed Harris nearly drowned and punched Cameron in the face. Ed Harris almost died filming the descent scene where his helmet fills with liquid. Harris held his breath while being towed through the set, but when he ran out of air and signaled for oxygen, his safety diver got hung up on a cable and couldn't reach him. Another crew member gave Harris a regulator, but it was upside down, causing him to inhale water instead of oxygen. Underwater cinematographer Al Giddings saw what happened, ripped out the upside-down regulator, and gave Harris his own. When Harris surfaced, he immediately punched James Cameron in the face. That evening, while driving home, Harris had to pull over because he burst into spontaneous crying. This wasn't Harris's only near drowning. He almost died several times during production. Harris has since publicly refused to discuss the Abyss, stating, "I'm not talking about the Abyss and I never will. The only time he's spoken about it is in the documentary Under Pressure, Making the Abyss." Number 19. Cameron nearly drowned after his oxygen ran out 35 feet underwater. James Cameron himself almost died during production. In a 2009 Los Angeles Times piece, Cameron recounted nearly drowning in the 35-foot deep water tanks. For reasons never explained, Cameron decided to work without safety divers, called angels, whose sole purpose was aiding distressed cast and crew. He descended with 40 pounds of weight strapped to his body for stability. Days into production, Cameron was working with Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio when he took a breath and got nothing. His pressure gauge read 0. He was completely out of oxygen at the bottom of a 35-foot tank. His safety diver was too far away. Cameron grabbed the regulator from the safety diver when he finally arrived, but it wouldn't deliver air. Cameron later explained, "I had a hell of a time trying to stay calm while this guy was futzing around. So I punched him in the face and swam to the surface and therefore survived." Only an hour after this near-death experience, Cameron was back at the bottom of the tank filming. Number 18. Mastrantonio had an emotional breakdown during the CPR scene. The famous scene where Harris's character desperately tries to revive Mastrantonio's drowned character became a breaking point. Cameron ordered countless takes of Harris slapping Mastrantonio across the face while screaming "fight" repeatedly. Mastrantonio was soaking wet, exhausted, and being physically struck over and over. Midway through one take, the camera malfunctioned. A light indicated they'd run out of film, but nobody said anything. They kept filming Harris slapping and screaming at Mastrantonio while the camera captured nothing. When she realized what happened, Mastrantonio stood up, walked off set, and yelled at Cameron, "We are not animals." She reportedly suffered a complete physical and emotional breakdown. Harris later told Entertainment Weekly, "We were guinea pigs, in a way. Jim wasn't quite sure how this was all going to go down." The scene exists in the film, but what audiences see is Mastrantonio's genuine anguish after hours of brutal, pointless takes. Number 17. Harris burst into tears while driving home from the stress. The physical and psychological toll on Ed Harris was devastating. Harris had to pull over his car one evening while driving home because he burst into spontaneous sobbing. The accumulated stress of nearly drowning multiple times, working 11 to 12 hours daily underwater, wearing heavy diving equipment, and enduring Cameron's relentless perfectionism broke him. Harris later said, "We were guinea pigs, in a way. Jim wasn't quite sure how this was all going to go down. During the drowning scene, I was screaming at her to come back and wake up, and I was slapping her across the face, and I see that they've run out of film in the camera, there's a light on the camera, and nobody had said anything." The emotional breakdown while driving reveals the human cost behind Cameron's technical achievements. Harris's refusal to ever discuss the film again speaks to trauma that never healed. Number 16. Cast and crew were told to urinate in their wetsuits. To save time between takes, cast and crew were instructed to relieve themselves in their wetsuits rather than surface, change, and return. This created catastrophic problems. The urine, combined with the water's warmth and sunlight, caused algae to bloom throughout the 7,500,000-gallon tank. The production response was massive chlorine dumps to kill the algae. The chlorine levels became so extreme that it burned divers' skin, turned their hair green, and in Ed Harris's case, turned his hair completely white. The chlorine exposure was so severe that crew members suffered chemical burns and respiratory problems. Cameron himself noted that cast and crew spent so much time submerged that they frequently required decompression. Cameron would watch dailies while hanging upside down in a decompression chamber to relieve the stress from his helmet's weight on his shoulders. The urine, algae, chlorine cycle created a toxic environment that actors were forced to spend 11 to 12 hours daily breathing and absorbing. Number 15. Production lasted 140 days and went $4 million over budget. The Abyss began filming in February 1988 and wrapped December 8, 1988, 140 days of brutal underwater shooting. The production went $4 million over budget, with estimates placing the final cost between $47 million and $70 million depending on the source. Cameron admitted he worked for half his usual fee to cover additional effects costs. The delays were caused by countless safety issues, technical failures, and the unprecedented difficulty of filming 40% of principal photography underwater. Actor Leo Burmester said, "Shooting The Abyss has been the hardest thing I've ever done." Jim Cameron is the type of director who pushes you to the edge, but he doesn't make you do anything he wouldn't do himself. The grueling 6-day, 70-hour weeks on an isolated South Carolina set meant cast and crew endured over 6 months of the most physically demanding filmmaking in history. The budget overruns forced Cameron to sacrifice his salary, yet the film still grossed only $90 million worldwide, barely breaking even. Number 14. A lightning storm destroyed the tarp and forced night shooting. Halfway through production, disaster struck. A massive lightning storm ripped a hole in the black tarp covering the 40-foot deep tank at the Cherokee Nuclear Power Station. Repairing the tarp would take too long and production was already running over schedule, so Cameron made a brutal decision: switched to night shoots. This meant cast and crew worked overnight in the cold, dark South Carolina facility, filming underwater scenes in complete darkness except for production lights. The night shoots added physical and psychological strain to an already unbearable production. Actors couldn't tell day from night, their circadian rhythms were destroyed, and the isolation of the abandoned nuclear facility became even more oppressive. The tarp damage represents how even nature conspired to make The Abyss more difficult than it should have been. Number 13. The film was shot in an abandoned nuclear reactor containment vessel. The production filmed at the Cherokee Nuclear Power Station outside Gaffney, South Carolina. Duke Power had spent nearly $700 million constructing the site before abandoning it due to economic factors. Drive-in mogul Earl Owensby purchased the site intending to build a movie studio. When he heard Cameron was scouting underwater locations in the Caribbean and large tanks in Europe, Owensby invited him to the unfinished plant. The reactor containment vessel could hold over 7,500,000 gallons of water, the largest underwater filming tank ever created. The facility's isolation, 40 miles from the nearest city, meant cast and crew were trapped. There were no nearby hotels, restaurants, or entertainment. The abandoned nuclear site became a prison where exhausted actors spent months underwater in a massive concrete tomb. The psychological impact of working in a place designed to contain nuclear reactions added to the production's oppressive atmosphere. The tank took 5 days to fill and became a chlorine-saturated hellscape. Number 12. Actors performed most stunts themselves, including holding their breath. Very few scenes use stunt people. When Harris drags Mastrantonio's dead body back to the rig, that's actually Mastrantonio holding her breath with rescue divers standing by. The underwater action sequences, characters running from flooding water, drowning behind closed doors, dodging exploding rig parts, were all performed by actors, not stunt doubles. This wasn't method acting, it was Cameron demanding authenticity at any cost. Actors had to become fully qualified divers before filming began, training for a week in the Cayman Islands. The physical toll was immense. Cast members spent 11 to 12 hours daily, 40 feet underwater, while crew worked even deeper. Actor Michael Biehn complained he only had 3 to 4 weeks of actual screen work but spent 5 months on set waiting. The lack of stunt doubles meant every dangerous moment carried genuine risk. The production's safety record was abysmal, yet Cameron insisted actors do everything themselves. Number 11. Cameron's brother had a live crab crawl in his mouth. In the crashed submarine sequence, a lifeless body has a crab crawl out of its mouth, a genuinely disturbing image. That corpse was James Cameron's younger brother, Mike Cameron, holding his breath with his mouth open while a live crab crawled around inside. This wasn't special effects or a mechanical crab, it was a real creature exploring the inside of someone's mouth while that person remained perfectly still holding their breath underwater. The shot required multiple takes as the crab didn't always cooperate, meaning Cameron's brother endured this repeatedly. The scene exemplifies Cameron's commitment to practical effects over comfort, safety, or common sense. That audiences never knew they were watching someone endure a live animal in their mouth underwater demonstrates how Cameron's obsession with realism created situations that bordered on torture. Number 10. Cast and crew called it The Abuse, Son of Abyss, and Life's Abyss, and Then You Dive. The production's nickname tells you everything. Cast and crew coined derogatory names: The Abuse, Son of Abyss, and Life's Abyss, and Then You Dive. These weren't jokes, they were cries for help. The names spread throughout the production, eventually appearing on blackboards and call sheets as crew members' way of processing their trauma. Cameron was aware of the nicknames, but didn't care. He later responded to complaints by saying, "For every hour they spent trying to figure out what magazine to read, we spent an hour at the bottom of the tank breathing compressed air." His dismissive attitude toward cast and crew suffering demonstrated his priorities. The film mattered more than the people making it. These nicknames became shorthand in Hollywood for brutal productions. When actors heard about a Cameron project, they'd reference The Abuse as a warning about what they were signing up for. Number 9. Real oxygenated fluorocarbon fluid was used for the rat breathing scene. The scene where a rat breathes liquid wasn't faked, it was real. Doctors Johannes Kilstra and Peter Bennett of Duke University pioneered oxygenated fluorocarbon fluid breathing techniques and consulted on the film, giving detailed instructions on preparing the fluid. The rats were actually breathing the liquid, though the only reason for cutting to actors' faces during the scene was to avoid showing the rats defecating from momentary panic as they began breathing fluid. Ed Harris refused to breathe the liquid himself despite Cameron's requests, opting instead to hold his breath while his helmet filled with fluid. The liquid breathing technology was real, cutting edge, and potentially dangerous. That Cameron wanted Harris to actually breathe, it demonstrates his obsession with authenticity over actor safety. The rats survived, but their visible panic was genuine. They were experiencing something no mammal had evolved to do. Number 8. Cameron and producer Gail Ann Hurd divorced during production. James Cameron and producer Gail Ann Hurd were married before The Abyss began. They separated during pre-production and divorced in February 1989, 2 months after principal photography wrapped but before the film's August 1989 release. The couple's relationship collapsed under the stress of the production. Cameron later based the character of Lindsay, played by Mastrantonio, on Hurd, which added uncomfortable layers to the on-set dynamic. The film's central relationship, a separated couple forced to work together underwater who must rediscover their love, mirrored Cameron and Hurd's real disintegrating marriage. Cast and crew witnessed Cameron's personal life imploding while he demanded they perform increasingly dangerous stunts. The divorce added psychological strain to a production already marked by physical danger. Hurd would later acknowledge in interviews that The Abyss took a strange left turn in its final third, suggesting creative conflicts between the divorcing couple affected the film's coherence. Number 7. Cameron fell asleep during dinner with food on his chest and a fork in his hand. James Cameron was so exhausted from working 6 days a week, 10+ hours daily, sometimes more, that he would fall asleep during dinner in bed, waking in the morning with a half-eaten plate on his chest while clenching a fork in his hand. This detail reveals the toll even Cameron paid for his obsession. While he pushed cast and crew to their limits, he was simultaneously destroying himself. Cameron later admitted, "I knew this was going to be a hard shoot, but even I had no idea just how hard. I don't ever want to go through this again." Yet 10 years later, he made Titanic in an even larger tank. Cameron's relationship with suffering is complex. He inflicts it on others, but also endures it himself, creating a perverse egalitarianism of misery. His falling asleep with food and fork demonstrates that everyone on The Abyss paid a price, though some paid more than others. Number 6. The film opened second with under $10 million, a box office disappointment. The Abyss was delayed repeatedly, missing its July 4, 1989 target release date due to production and visual effects problems. When it finally opened August 9, 1989, it debuted in second place with under $10 million, devastating for a film that had cost between $47 to $70 million. The film grossed approximately $90 million worldwide, barely breaking even or possibly losing money depending on which budget figures you believe. Industry insiders blamed nervous executives who'd ordered the ending completely reshot after preview audiences laughed at scenes of serious intent. Critics praised technical achievements but criticized the finale. Newsweek called it pretty damn silly, while the Los Angeles Times described it as watered down. Cameron himself wasn't satisfied with the theatrical cut, later releasing a special edition that restored 26 minutes. The box office disappointment was crushing after the brutal production everyone had endured. The film's financial underperformance almost ended Cameron's career before Terminator 2 redeemed him. Number 5. Studio executives were nervous when preview audiences laughed at serious scenes. During test screenings, preview audiences laughed at scenes Cameron intended as serious and profound, particularly the alien encounter sequences and the ending where the NTI's ship rises from the deep. Cameron screened the full-length version before completing visual effects on the tidal wave sequence, and predictably, test audiences listed the unfinished wave portions as scenes they liked least. Studio executives panicked. Barry Diller, head of Fox, told Cameron it was too much movie. Industry insiders claimed executives ordered the ending completely reshot, though Cameron later said he voluntarily cut the tidal wave sequence because he was never quite satisfied with the visual reality. He also noted that going to the surface robbed the narrative of Deepcore's claustrophobic intimacy. The test audience reactions revealed a fundamental mismatch between Cameron's vision and audience expectations. After Aliens, people expected action and horror. Instead, The Abyss delivered sentimentality and Close Encounters-style wonder that felt unearned. Number 4. The original CGI tidal wave sequences were cut from the theatrical release. Cameron cut approximately 26 minutes from the theatrical release, including elaborate CGI tidal wave sequences where the alien NTI's create massive waves threatening to destroy coastal cities. These sequences, supervised by ILM animation director Wes Takahashi, would have been the film's climax, showing the aliens' power and humanity's vulnerability. But test audiences reacted poorly to unfinished effects, and Cameron felt the waves didn't meet his standards. The cuts also removed much of the aliens' motivation. They were judging humanity, creating the waves as potential punishment before deciding humans deserved another chance. The theatrical version ends abruptly with the NTI's ship rising to the surface with no explanation of why or what happens next. The special edition, released in 1993, restored these sequences. Original production sound recordings had been lost, requiring new dialogue and Foley. Actor Kid Brewer had died before re-recording his dialogue, forcing editors to lift his original tracks from optical sound prints of dailies. The special edition was dedicated to Brewer's memory. Number 3. One safety diver got hung up on a cable while Harris was drowning. Ed Harris's closest call with death occurred because of a safety diver's mistake. Harris was being towed through the set with his helmet filled with liquid, holding his breath. When he ran out of air, he signaled for oxygen, standard protocol, but his assigned safety diver got hung up on a cable and couldn't reach him. Harris was drowning while the person whose job was saving him struggled with equipment. Another crew member finally arrived with a regulator, but handed it to Harris upside down, causing him to inhale water. Underwater cinematographer Al Giddings intervened, ripping out the malfunctioning regulator and giving Harris his own. The incident exposed catastrophic safety failures. Why were cables where safety divers could get tangled? Why wasn't the backup regulator checked for correct orientation? Why was Harris doing this stunt at all? These questions were never adequately answered. The safety diver's failure nearly killed Hollywood's lead actor, yet production continued without significant protocol changes. Cameron's response was minimal. He got punched, absorbed it, and kept filming. Number 2. Cameron worked for half his fee to cover additional effects costs. As the budget spiraled out of control and Fox threatened to shut down production, James Cameron made a financial sacrifice. He worked for half his usual director's fee to cover additional effects costs. Cameron was so committed to his vision that he personally absorbed millions in overruns. This wasn't altruism, it was obsession. Cameron couldn't let The Abyss fail, even if it meant financial ruin. His willingness to sacrifice his salary demonstrates how completely the film consumed him. While cast and crew endured physical torture, Cameron endured financial torture, betting his career and fortune on a movie about underwater aliens and drowned love. The gamble barely paid off. The film's modest box office meant Cameron likely lost money personally. Yet he never expressed regret about the financial sacrifice, only about the physical toll on cast and crew. Cameron's relationship with money has always been secondary to his relationship with filmmaking. He'll spend or sacrifice anything to achieve his vision, a trait that served him well on Titanic and Avatar, but nearly destroyed him on the abyss. Number 1. Mastrantonio later said Fun to Make was not one of them. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's post-production quote summarized everything. The abyss was a lot of things. Fun to Make was not one of them. This carefully worded statement revealed volumes. She didn't say it was challenging but rewarding. She didn't say it was difficult but worth it. She said it was not fun. A devastating indictment from an actress who just survived 6 months of near drowning, emotional breakdowns, and walking off set screaming that they weren't animals. Mastrantonio's words stand alongside Ed Harris's "I'm not talking about the abyss, and I never will" as the production's epitaph. Two lead actors so traumatized by their experience that decades later they still can't discuss it positively. Mastrantonio never worked with Cameron again. The film damaged her relationship with filmmaking, leading her to be selective about future projects. Her quote became shorthand in Hollywood for productions that cross from demanding to abusive. When actors now hear about challenging shoots, someone inevitably references Mastrantonio's line, a reminder that no film is worth human suffering. Bonus fact, Cameron used decompression time to watch dailies hanging upside down. James Cameron's commitment to the production was so extreme that he developed a bizarre routine, watching dailies while hanging upside down in a decompression chamber. Crew members spent so much time below 50 feet of water that they frequently required decompression to avoid the bends. Rather than waste this mandatory decompression time, Cameron had a viewing window installed in the chamber. He'd watch the day's footage while inverted, relieving the stress from his heavy helmet's weight on his shoulders. This detail captures Cameron's mindset perfectly. Every moment had to be productive, even mandatory medical procedures. While his body was forced to decompress, his mind was already evaluating footage, planning next shoots, obsessing over details. The image of Cameron hanging upside down watching underwater footage through a chamber window perfectly symbolizes the Abyss production: painful, uncomfortable, necessary, and completely insane. That he found ways to work even during safety-mandated breaks reveals why cast and crew nicknamed it The Abuse. For Cameron, there was no rest, no breaks, no mercy. Just the relentless pursuit of his underwater vision. The Abyss premiered August 9, 1989, after 140 brutal days of filming and 7 months of post-production panic. Ed Harris nearly drowned multiple times and refuses to discuss it. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio walked off set screaming and later said it wasn't fun. Cameron himself almost died, punched a safety diver, and sacrificed half his salary. The cast urinated in their wetsuits, developing algae blooms that required toxic chlorine levels that turned hair white and burned skin. The film grossed $90 million, barely breaking even. Critics were mixed. Cameron cut 26 minutes, including expensive tidal wave sequences. The production became Hollywood legend as the most brutal shoot in history, nicknamed The Abuse by those who survived it. Yet somehow, through suffering and sacrifice, Cameron created technical innovations that paved the way for Terminator 2, Titanic, and Avatar. The CGI water tentacle was cinema's first convincing liquid effect. The underwater cinematography remains stunning. The practical effects, real sets, real diving, real danger, gave the film tactile authenticity impossible to replicate digitally. The Abyss stands as proof that genius and madness coexist, that technical achievement requires human cost, and that some directors value their vision more than their actors' well-being. Cameron later admitted, "I don't ever want to go through this again." He was lying. 10 years later, he built an even larger tank for Titanic.